On the surface, our world looks familiar, but strangeness is all around. You just need to know where to look. Beneath this strangeness lies some truly astonishing science. Come with us as we travel the world to bring you the odd, the bizarre, and the downright peculiar. We meet the outer space odour sniffer.
My friends and family think I'm a little crazy.
The world's strangest pizza delivery man.
I don't think there's anybody else on this planet that delivers pizza the way I deliver pizza.
A bee teacher.
You can teach them to learn anything, but here we mainly concentrate on drugs and explosives.
And a guy who terrifies people for a living.
When I hear those screams, I know I've done a good job.
It's been calculated that on average we spend over 100,000 hours at work. You could see that as 11.5 years on the job without a tea break. That's a pretty scary thought. Now, some of us love our jobs, some of us find work life a bit laborious, but then there are those people that do a job that's just plain strange. Apart from the stunning New Mexico landscape he drives through each morning, George Aldrich's daily commute is much like any other. He's an easygoing guy who's been in the same job for nearly 40 years, but it's no ordinary job. George smells anything and everything, even the things most of us find disgusting.
I try to keep my sense of smell in tune, and so I play games with odors, where other people might smell something and just move on.
George isn't disturbed or anything, it's how he earns his living.
My friends and family think I'm a little crazy.
George Aldrich works for NASA. And at their White Sands test facility, his nose reigns supreme.
All the materials that go inside the capsule with the astronauts has to go through certain tests, and so I'm in charge of doing toxicity and odor testing. I use my sense of smell for 38 years to smell stuff before it goes into space. What really makes me important to NASA is that I actually use my sense of smell to help protect the astronauts from obnoxious odors in space.
Incredibly, the success of entire missions depend on NASA's #1 nasal naught. If George's nose isn't performing at the very peak of its abilities, the consequences are serious. Susanna Harper is the manager of the nasal lab.
Here on the ground, if there's some kind of a foul odor, maybe someone was in the bathroom or cut an onion open, it eventually airs out. And so what is causing that smell to go away is really the dilution of additional air coming in. But when we're in the space station or the shuttle, there is no additional air. We don't open a window and get some fresh air in there.
Like the rest of us mere mortals, George can detect more than 10,000 different smells, using up to 400 nasal receptors. But unlike the rest of us, he uses them to their full capacity every day.
What we have to do is here on the ground verify that we're not sending new odors up there, because once they're up there, they're stuck there.
The astronauts are actually allowed to have a small bag of personal belongings that usually includes things like a Bible, family photos. We have an astronaut that wanted to build a ship in a bottle, and so we were looking for different types of glues. Everybody knows how that is. It reeks of odor.
Even the smallest smell can hang around for years and years. And that not only affects the astronauts' usefulness, it can also make them sick. If George fails to identify just one problematic pong, a whole mission could be in jeopardy. And just to prove the point, in 1976, the stench on board a Soviet spaceship was so bad that the cosmonauts got sick and the entire mission had to be abandoned a month early. Strong and unpleasant smells can cause headaches and nausea. That's because we've evolved a sense of smell to act as a warning device. A foul smell immediately triggers a physical response, like gagging or sneezing.
What makes something smell is actually the chemical composition that it's made out of. Something that has sulfur compounds, as an example, are going to be slightly on the putrid side. A smelly sneaker, it has bacteria, and then that bacteria excretes butyric acid, and so that's what you're actually smelling. It's the same process for cheese. That's the reason dirty feet and cheese smells alike, because of the bacteria.
Sometimes ordinary objects exposed to the higher temperatures of the space station can start to smell. So George has to test them.
One of our astronauts wanted to take up his CD collection of 20 CDs, and so NASA had some concern about having that many CDs in a confined space or confined area. And so we actually tested 20 CDs, and it wound up being fairly toxic.
So far, the worst that the US astronauts have had to deal with is a burnt-out fridge motor, some rather strong aftershave, and some ink that caused nasal blisters. But because strong smells can often mask big problems, the nasal lab are happy for the astronauts to smell nothing.
The value in having a neutral odor environment is that we really want their senses to be keen and not overwhelmed, so that when an event occurs, maybe a small fire begins, or there's a leak of something on the space station, maybe ammonia, that they'll be able to smell it right away, because our noses are much more sensitive to smelling events than any kind of detector that we've been able to design so far.
George has carried out over 800 major smell tests for NASA. He's the reigning champion of odour. But ironically, every 4 months, his nose is tested to make sure it's still in peak condition.
This is putrid. It's a septic smell. You know, it's a pretty raunchy smell.
I'm going to step off the limb.
George has been tested 114 times. Today, he's passed again with flying colours. For the foreseeable future, Houston definitely does not have a problem.
Columbia on the high gate, over. Roger, the EVA.
Oh, and in case you're wondering, yes, he does have a favourite smell.
My favorite smell is money. I don't have any of it, but that's my favorite smell.
Apparently, size isn't everything. Try telling that to one scientist and his miniature friend. They're travelling the world to measure one of the biggest things there is. The discoverer of gravity, Isaac Newton, once said, "If I have seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants." But I bet he never thought one of these little fellas would be carrying on his work. The job of most garden ornaments is to be, well, ornamental. But every now and then, one is called upon to perform a great service for science.
This gnome is at the forefront of telling us about the Earth.
Meet Kern. He's an ordinary plastic garden gnome with a very unusual job. Kern travels the world testing one of the most important ideas in all of science. He's crossed all 7 continents and got more air miles than an international businessman. Kern's job is a little different, though. Wherever he goes, the same thing happens. He gets weighed. In Mexico City, he weighs 307.62 grams. But bizarrely in Mumbai, a bit less. And in London, he's even heavier. Although his waistline never increases, Kern can't seem to keep his weight under control. Dr. Andrew Pontzin, Professor of Physics from Cambridge University, is one of Kern's travelling companions. His job is to listen to what Kern is telling us.
This gnome might look like it's just an ordinary garden gnome, but actually it's an important experiment that's telling us how gravity changes as we move from location to location.
Gravity is the natural phenomenon which gives weight to objects and causes them to fall when dropped. Every planetary body, including the Earth, is surrounded by its own gravitational field, which emanates from the core. Kern's globe-trotting has revealed some surprising results. He's heavier when he's near the North and South Poles, and lighter when he's near the equator. This all makes sense to Dr. Puntzin.
If you take a look at what happens when something's spinning, if you imagine that you were standing on the equator of this globe, then you'd be kind of thrown off it in the same way that if this car goes around a corner, then we kind of all get thrown to one side. That effect of being thrown off should mean that you weigh slightly less than you do if you're standing up at the poles.
But what's harder to understand is why there are some random pockets of unexplained and uneven weight gain that don't seem to follow any pattern. If the world was a perfect sphere, gravity should exert the same force around all points of the Earth that are of equal distance from the centre. So is Kern actually telling us something very surprising about the shape of the Earth?
If you go and map the terrain of the Earth, you find that it's not just a simple sphere. It's all sort of knobbly, it's got mountains and so on, so perhaps it'd be better to think of it more like a potato. If you're at one part of this potato compared to another part, you're going to be different distances away from the centre of the Earth. And that means that the strength of gravity is going to be different. And we can actually go and check that now by taking our gnome up a tall tower.
The amazing travelling gnome has proven that the Earth is actually not round. Technically, it's a geoid. And to show how sensitive he is to differences in gravity, Dr. Puntzin is going to check his weight difference over just a few stories. First, Kern is weighed at ground level.
OK, so it weighs 308.69 grams here. But now I want to find out what it weighs 183 metres up there.
So, will being 180 metres further away from the centre of the Earth really make a difference to Kern's weight?
OK, we're going to put gravity to the test. I think that's it. I think it's 308.67, which is less than it weighed down the stairs, which is exactly what you'd expect.
Kern is only 0.02 grams lighter than he was at ground level, but Dr. Puntzin's and Newton's point is proven, that gravity really does get less the further you are from the Earth's centre. All of Kern's hard work has also taught us a fantastic way to lose weight without dieting. Make for the nearest tall building. This is John Wardley. He might look harmless enough as he strolls through the English countryside, but be warned. He's working out how to terrify millions of people.
What we're doing is we're playing with people's emotions. We're giving them thrills. We're giving them excitement away from their everyday life. So it's rather like a magician on a stage who's amazing people and baffling people. We're doing the same sort of thing, but with their actual bodies.
John isn't a sadist, although some might disagree. He has the unusual job of terrifying people for their own pleasure. He's designed and created some of the world's most thrilling roller coaster rides, such as these here in Thorpe Park, England.
These pieces of machinery actually are show business. They're not just a load of steel. They create real drama, theatre, excitement, and that's what show business is all about.
After years working in theatre, John moved on to creating many of the thrills and spills in James Bond movies. But after a while, even that world wasn't enough.
That's absolutely terrifying.
Really? Yeah, really fantastic.
Hey, straight down, straight up, straight down. You know, what's going on?
Another of John's victims is Emma Bassett. Her experience on one of John's roller coasters 12 years ago changed the course of her life. Although she didn't know it, she was severely ill. But the extreme physical effects of a single ride were enough to profoundly affect her destiny. But more on that later. Today, Emma has returned to Thorpe Park as John's guest to experience one of his latest creations, the Swarm. John is a master at creating unforgettable rides and uses a whole bag of tricks to trigger physical and emotional responses. He and Emma put on heart monitors to help illustrate this. Almost immediately, in anticipation of what's to come, Emma's body floods with adrenaline.
My heart rate's already starting to go up.
Just relax, you'll be fine.
She's now in fright mode.
Oh no, I'm starting to climb up high.
The extra adrenaline has pushed her heart rate from a resting 68 beats per minute to almost 100.
Here we go.
We're now hanging upside down and we're dropping weightless.
5 seconds later, Emma's heart rate is a chest-pounding 133 BPM.
Heart rate's still climbing.
Now we're pulling about 3G and 1G upwards.
But for John, it's just another day at the office. His heart rate has barely changed. To understand just how John succeeds in scaring the pants off everyone, we need to take a closer look at how he exploits the laws of motion. John's first weapon in his arsenal of terror is anticipation. As the roller coaster climbs towards its first terrifying peak, the tension builds and builds and builds. Into the first drop at nearly 80 kilometers per hour, John has cleverly built in a few nasty surprises to keep everyone on their toes, like the odd twist and plunge. While everyone else is screaming, John is just starting to enjoy himself. Now he's got the audience where he wants them, it's time to squeeze a little more terror out of them, with some G-forces. On the ground, gravity is 1G, but it can be changed by something as simple as jumping off a bench.
When I hit the ground, I was experiencing a momentary force 2.5 times my own weight.
Jumping off a bench, you only experience a change of gravity in milliseconds. It's so quick, you don't even notice. John's skill is that he can make changes in G-force last much longer, sometimes seconds at a time.
All the time we're changing those G-forces. And it is this varying pattern of changing G-forces which produces this adrenaline rush and this thrill for the riders.
Finally, the last weapon in John's bag of tricks, subjecting his fare-paying victims to a complete change in gear. Zero gravity.
0G, you're weightless, you're floating. So when you're upside down in the loop of a roller coaster, you are weightless.
But suspending his helpless victims upside down, hundreds of feet above the ground, is surely asking for trouble. Not if you were paying attention in your physics class, it isn't. Over to you, Emma. As she spins this glass of water, centripetal force keeps the water at the bottom of the container. But if she slows down, the water goes everywhere. And it's precisely these extreme forces generated by John's roller coaster that 12 years ago had such a profound impact on Emma's life.
I went to the roller coasters on the weekend with my friends, was just going on them, like on all of them as a normal teenager. Yeah, I was feeling poorly, but I thought, might as well go, it's probably just a bug.
But Emma didn't just have a bug. Her symptoms deteriorated, and 3 days after looping the loop, she was in hospital.
I was told that I had a large brain tumour, I needed operating immediately.
A brain scan revealed a tumour the size of a satsuma, which was preventing cerebrospinal fluid from moving around Emma's brain. Really, Emma should have been dead. But as it turned out, the extreme forces from the Nemesis ride she'd been on a few days before had redistributed some of the fluid, buying Emma precious time. Surgeons removed the tumour just hours before it would have certainly killed her.
I told them that I'd been to the theme park a few days before with my friends, and they said that going on the roller coasters evidently saved my life.
That's fantastic. And you've now had the operation?
Yeah, now. I had it completely removed now, and I'm completely fine now, just a normal person.
So people will be going to their doctors and try and get rides at Thorpe Park on prescription
Probably,
now?
Yeah.
Very humbling. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that a thing like this that's just designed to produce screams and thrills could actually save somebody's life.
Emma's recovery is music to John's ears, as is something else he can never hear enough of. Meet the man whose job forces him to go the extra mile with your meal.
I don't think there's anybody else on this planet that delivers pizza the way I deliver pizza.
In the UK alone, we consume over 250 million pizzas a year. Most pizzas are delivered by a guy on a moped. But in America, there's one pizza delivery boy who does things a bit differently. Our search for the world's strangest jobs brings us to holiday mecca Key Largo in Florida. Here, just about everyone is chasing the tourist dollar, especially fast food delivery man Rob Doyle.
Hey, Elias, what's
Hey,
up?
Rob, how you doing?
Good. You got a small veggie for me?
Yes, I do. I got it all set to go.
Awesome.
But Rob isn't your average pizza delivery guy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
See you later.
One thing I can say, I don't think there's anybody else on this planet that delivers pizza the way I deliver pizza. I can't think of a single place anywhere, bar Key Largo, and me.
Rob's not ready to hand over his pizza and collect the cash just yet. He's got to go the extra mile to earn his crust. Rob works for an exclusive local establishment 6 meters below sea level. This rusting hulk was once a marine research centre, but for the last 25 years, it's been something entirely different. A hotel. This amazing place is owned by diving enthusiast Ian Koblick.
The concept of an underwater hotel started when one night we saw a spectacular event happen. A giant fish came out of nowhere. I said to myself, gee, you know, if more people could see and experience this sort of thing, it would be great. The hotel is right under those bubbles that you see out there. Rob has been trained in the operation and the maintenance of the habitat, as well as he's a scuba instructor, and it takes care of the guests. We call our service the Bell Buoy, and he delivers. If you want something, he'll get it for you.
Inside this 15-metre-long steel brick, there are just 2 bedrooms, and nightly rates start at a few $100s. Of course, all modern amenities are provided on tap. Rob delivers the pizza via the tradesman's entrance. No, it's not what you're thinking. It's the airlock under the structure.
Wow! All right! That was fast.
Water doesn't flood into the hotel because the air inside is at a higher pressure than the surrounding water. This means residents are living in a giant air bubble, much like an upturned glass in water. Even at just 6 meters underwater, the air pressure is almost twice that on the surface, meaning guests need to breathe in almost twice as much air to get enough oxygen. But if you wanted to go even deeper to eat your quattro formaggi, things might get a bit tougher.
At the deeper depths, you open a Coke and it doesn't fizz. It sucks in. Water boils at a higher temperature. There are lots of things that you have to correct.
Up on the surface, we don't really think about pressure affecting us, but divers find out that pressure has a great deal of effect on their body. So imagine you have a big pizza dough ball, okay? On the top, we don't really feel the pressure, but then we go down into the water and it feels like Martin's giving us a big hug. And the deeper we go, then it means a bear hug and a stronger hug and a stronger hug. And the deeper we go, the stronger that hug gets. What's happening is the water's pushing down on the outside of our bodies. The air that's inside of our bodies compresses.
But down here, it's so shallow, you don't have to worry about all that. You can lie back, relax, watch movies, stare at the fish. But while you're doing that, spare a thought for Rob.
You know, in the Florida Keys, I gotta be the only guy who delivers pizza the way I deliver pizza, and for which I think I should get tipped well. But not everybody agrees. Now it's time to get back to work.
The truth is always, they say, stranger than fiction. But down this quiet suburban road is a workplace so strange, you'd be forgiven for thinking you'd walked into a nightmare. In this lab, thousands of primeval creatures have been hooked up to machines. They're alive and completely unharmed. But the workers are draining them of a blue fluid. It's blood. Unnatural in colour and worth an awful lot of money.
It's definitely unique. I guess the analogy would be kind of a liquid gold.
The story starts over 1,600 kilometres away in Beaufort Beach, South Carolina. These fishermen work through the night to find creatures that have remained unchanged for millions of years.
We come on the full moons and the new moons when the tides are astronomically tall, and they're coming up to spawn to lay their eggs. How about this for a prehistoric creature? They make horror movies out of this thing here.
Fisherman Jerry Galt makes all his money from these living fossils. They're called horseshoe crabs, and they date back to way before the dinosaurs.
These are amazing creatures. It's pinching me, but I can barely feel it. So the only thing is you see these sharp spines on them in their tail. They could impale you if you fall in them.
Every spring, the crabs are drawn to the beach, and Jerry's waiting for them.
And they come up on these high tides during the full moon to lay their eggs. In between the moons, the eggs incubate and hatch.
The hatching season lasts just a couple of months, so Jerry and his team have no time to waste.
We got about 600 horseshoe crabs here tonight. They're only up on the beach for a couple hours, so we have to hustle to catch what we catch.
The next day, Jerry rewards his new pals with a makeover.
This is what you call a horseshoe crab pedicure manicure. I mean, you can see how tough these guys are. We're knocking these barnacles off. And they're so tough, it's like a helmet.
Spick and span, alive and not the least perturbed, the prisoners are then handed over to science. Head of the crab lab is Dr. Norman Wainwright.
It may appear a bit alien to see a horseshoe crab strapped to the table, but I assure you they come to no harm. The process does not hurt them in any way.
It may be hard to believe, but this eerie blue fluid that the workers are extracting from the crabs is actually their blood. Each crab donates around 100 millilitres. That's a third of its blood. The crab's blood is blue from traces of copper, but that's not what makes it valuable to science. It's actually the crab's immune system that Dr. Wainwright is interested in.
There is an immune system in the blood that is very primitive, yet very effective. The blood cells, when they come into contact with bacteria, will release enzymes, and those enzymes will cause a blood clot.
Here's how it works. In this vial is an enzyme extracted from the crab's blood. If we drop a tiny amount of bacteria onto this enzyme, it will solidify. What's amazing is that the enzyme can detect bacteria in 1 part per trillion. That's the equivalent of being able to find a pinch of salt in over 2 million gallons of soup. It's used by pharmaceutical companies worldwide in order to find trace elements of bacteria in their drugs and equipment. No other test is as fast or reliable.
This extremely sensitive enzyme reaction really is a fantastic tool for us to determine the level of cleanliness of drugs and medical devices.
And that is why the blood of a horseshoe crab is liquid gold. 1 quart of this blood liquid is worth over £9,000. And once the crabs have been bled, not quite dry, fisherman Jerry releases them back into the wild, 130 kilometres away from where they were caught, to ensure they aren't re-bled too soon.
They regenerate their blood in 30 days, which is very similar to humans. It's amazing how closely related we are in sort of weird kind of way. It's really nice to be part of such a noble fishery. You know, it's one thing to feed people, but it's another thing to keep people safe and healthy.
From the dawn of life on Earth to a glorified garage in Massachusetts, who'd have guessed that we'd ever have so much to thank some crabs for? Money's no good to them. Hopefully they'll be happy with a ride on a water slide. Wherever, whoever, and whatever we're all up to on Earth, we all do it by a single measurement of time, the 24-hour clock. But what do you do if your job is keeping track of something on another planet, like Mars? These happy campers at NASA are spending their days controlling the Mars rover. But a day on Mars isn't the same length as here on Earth. It's 39 minutes and 35 seconds longer, which means that the 800 people who work here have to set their clocks to match. The problem is, after just 1 week, they're all 4 hours and 40 minutes behind family, friends, and the rest of us. After just a couple of weeks, as their body clocks slowly reset, they're struggling with a kind of Martian jet lag. Fine for them and all the space soulmates they're sharing their days with. Bad news if it's their turn to take the kids to school. Bees, as far as most of us are concerned, they've got one job: to make us honey. But a tiny handful have been selected for something even more important: the fight against crime. This is Dr. Maxim Ruth. His job is creating quite a buzz in the world of law enforcement. He wants the world to welcome its first swarm of sniffer bees. Why? Well, a bee's scent detection is second to none, and it can be trained far faster than their canine friends.
The way in which they learn, because it's a reflex action, you can train them within minutes, whereas with a dog it's more of an intelligent response, so it can take several months to train a dog to respond to particular odours.
Bees don't have noses. Instead, they smell through tiny receptors on their antennae.
They have a highly sensitive sense of smell because when they're out foraging, they learn to associate the particular smells of a flower with the nectar. So when they get back to the hive, they can inform other bees that a particular odour relates to a particularly good source of nectar.
Dr. Ruth thinks he can harness this amazing sense of smell and get the bees to help fight crime.
You can teach them to learn anything, but here we mainly concentrate on drugs and explosives.
To turn these rookie bees into Starsky and Hutch, Dr. Ruth has to put them into training. They can't be leashed, so Dr. Ruth places them in individual capsules. These hold them still without causing them any harm.
These are ordinary, everyday honeybees that you would find in any hive outside. We're just putting them into these bee holders, so they're just gently restrained.
Today, the bees are going to be taught the smell of cocaine.
So once the bees are into their holders, they go off for their bee training.
Dr. Ruth gets the bees to associate the smell of the drug with a sugar reward.
We're using simple Pavlovian conditioning. So once I push this button, it's going to divert 6 seconds of the odour sample towards the bee. At the same time, if you give the bee a sugar reward, eventually it will associate the smell of the odour with a sugar reward and automatically stick its tongue out.
Soon they're sticking their tongues out whenever the smell is present, even without the sugar reward. It takes only minutes to train a bee to respond to a particular odour, even an amount as small as 5 parts per trillion.
Once the bee smells the odour, it sticks out its tongue. That tongue is essentially breaking a light beam, and we just measure the bee's tongue breaking the light beam.
Once the bees have passed all their exams, they're ready. This is their new home. Meet the Vasor, the last word in biomechanical drug detection.
6 bee holders go into these cassettes, and then 6 of these cassettes go into the Vasor 136.
Inside the Vasor, 36 bees are ready for action. Air is drawn into the machine and wafts over the bees. Tiny sensors then pick up the movements of the bees' tongues as they respond to the smell. Dr. Ruth is confident his young trainees are ready. Let the smelling commence. They need to identify which of these 3 jars contains a tiny amount of cocaine. The bees sniff jar 1. Then onto jar 2. Nothing. But when they get to bottle 3, their little tongues poke out with excitement. They've sniffed out the drug. It might be possible to train each of the 36 bees inside the Vasor to identify a different smell. So alongside the presence of illegal drugs such as heroin and cocaine, they could be used to sniff out explosives. Even in medical diagnosis, they could be used to identify the presence of disease. Dr. Ruth believes that when it comes to harnessing bee power, the sky's the limit. How one man is bringing a medieval solution to a very modern problem.
I love my job. I have one of the best jobs in the whole world where I'm not sitting at a desk, I'm outside. I've always been an outdoorsman. I've loved fishing. I'm a hunter.
There are millions of ordinary jobs being performed every day around the world. But Cao Xianzhong is a clever man and saw an extraordinary opportunity in growing pears, but not normal pears. Pears that are shaped like Buddha. To produce this unnaturally shaped fruit, the enlightened farmer has created a Buddha-shaped plastic mold. This encloses each fruit from when it starts to grow. Within a few days, they take on the Buddha's shape. The pears are selling like hotcakes throughout China. There's no plans as yet for any other famous figures. What if he knows who Lady Gaga is? Aeroplanes and birds don't mix. It's been estimated that the cost to the aeronautical industry of bird strikes is $1.2 billion a year, and that's not even to mention the potentially lethal nature of a bird strike. But at Pearson Aerodrome in Canada, it's one man's job to rid the airfield of birds, and he's come up with a rather novel way of doing it. This is the workplace of Rob Chevalier. Rob makes sure that planes take off and land safely. He's not a pilot, a mechanic or an air traffic controller. But every year he prevents hundreds of disasters, like this. April 2007. A plane leaving Manchester Airport sent out a mayday.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Thompson 253 Hotel, engine failure. We are continuing with northwesterly and then inbound towards Wallasey.
It was forced to make an emergency landing because its engine had caught fire. The cause? Well, during takeoff, 2 birds struck the engine and set it alight. So what's that got to do with Rob?
Bird activity at 15 left. We are on our way.
Pearson Airport has a massive problem with geese, gulls and starlings. Throughout the year, hundreds of thousands like to hang out here.
They're drawn to the area of the airport where they have water, food, and shelter, so it's a perfect place or an oasis for birds to come to thrive, to eat, and habitate.
Even though birds are small and planes are very big, they can cause a lot of problems.
The birds go into the engine and the engines break, or the birds hit the airplane, breaking a windshield. It's causing aircraft damage, flight loss, and possibly a crash.
And most famously, a flock of Canada geese collided with an American Airbus in 2009, forcing the pilot to land in the Hudson River. Pearson Airport has tried pesticides, guns and plenty more besides, but in the end only one solution looked like it would help avoid airplane Armageddon: adding more birds.
My job consists of using birds of prey to prey upon the birds around the airport to scare them away.
Falconry is the ancient art of hunting with birds, beginning in Mongolia over 3,000 years ago.
The reason why we use birds of prey instead of using a lot of bangers or firearms or sonic wave things that they're still trying to develop is that birds have an instinct of staying away from birds of prey.
Rob has an elite team of highly trained birds, each with a different skill. A hawk, for example, can see its prey over 3 kilometers away.
It's like a toolbox. Just having one tool in your toolbox doesn't allow you to get rid of all problematic birds, but using different types of birds gives you better ammo.
And it's falcons that Rob turns to when dealing with his biggest headache: starlings.
The problem with starlings is that they swarm or they group together. And the problem with that is it's not just that small bird that's 70 grams, but when you add into having 1,000 or 2,000 birds, then you're now looking at thousands of grams running into an airplane.
But once Rob has released his falcons, the starlings are soon heading for the hills. Rob's been using his historic hunting method for the past 11 years and can see no sign of it going out of fashion.
Birds of prey have been used at airports for approximately 30 to 40 years, but in the last 20 years, it's been taken to a whole new level.
So the next time you find yourself waiting to get airborne and off on your holiday, spare a thought for the men, women, and falcons who make it possible.
I love my job. I have one of the best jobs in the whole world where I'm not sitting at a desk, I'm outside, but it's just you and your bird hunting, and it's an amazing, amazing feeling.